Hello everybody, this is City Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel today. Today is day 16 of Christy's Beautiful Life, 30 Days of Sketches, and Scraptember. The sketch for today is on the screen and the Scraptember prompt is rainbow. I'm starting off by making a really large circle. I'm trying to capture the shape of the image that's in the sketch, and so I'm making a really large circle using a Creative Memory circle cutter. And I needed a smaller circle as well, so I use a smaller circle cutter and cut out a smaller circle. The small circle is the size of the photo I'm going to be using, and I'm going to use the large circle that's in the background to create some templates to construct a sun. That's going to be the main part of my background. I drew a small circle on the circle, and now I'm using my ruler to make some rays coming out of that circle, and I'm making the rays slightly different widths. That's just to add a little bit of interest. I'm going to be cutting all of these out, and I'm going to be cutting pattern papers the same size as the little slices that I cut out, and I'm going to be using a collection that I absolutely love. It's a summer collection called Bow Bunny Boardwalk. And it has really bright, intense reds and yellows and oranges, and I feel like those pattern papers will be just perfect for making a sun. I numbered each of the rays so that I could reconstruct the sun easily after I cut it into pieces. I wanted the sections of the sun to be a little bit more like triangles, so I'm using my scissors and I'm clipping off the arch top, or I guess you could say the rounded tops. And this gives me more of the look that I wanted, and I think that it matches the sketch a little bit better. Once I have all the sections cut out and trimmed, I'm going to use those to cut out pieces of pattern paper that are the same size. And you could see the pattern paper over to the left. My favorite is the yellow, so I started with the yellow. And I'm going to vary which pattern papers I use. I'm going to use some of the yellow, some of the orange, and then there's also some paper that's red, and I'm going to use that as well. And I'm not going to include all of the footage of me cutting out the pieces, but you could see here that I've cut out one piece of pattern paper for each of those pieces of the template. I turn them over and I number them so that I could easily reassemble the sun. And there have been times in the past where I've made similar layouts and I have not numbered the pieces, and that's how I learned that it's a good idea to number the pieces. Even if you don't use the numbers, they're there if you do need them. I'm inking the edges of each of these rays of the sun with some distress oxides, and I don't include footage of all of this, but I use a couple of different colors. I use carved pumpkin and crackling campfire. First, I ink the edges with the carved pumpkin, and then I go back around again and I put some crackling campfire on each of the pieces as well. Now that I'm done inking the edges of all of the rays of the sun, I'm going to start assembling it. I took that small circle that I cut earlier, I put some ATG adhesive on it, and now I'm attaching all of the rays to the circle. And I don't plan on leaving that small circle brown. That's just the scrap piece of paper that I'm using to attach everything down to. I put the last few rays of the sun in place, and then I'm going to cover up that brown circle. I'm going to use some of the yellow pattern paper. So I use my Creative Memory circle cutter to cut out a bright yellow circle, and I adjusted a couple of those rays, and then I was thinking that I wanted to keep everything consistent, so I used the dauber and I put some distress oxide on the edge of the circle. I was thinking that I wanted the colors to be a little bit more balanced, so I made that red ray into a yellow ray, and then I switched it with an orange ray, and now I feel that the sun is a little bit more balanced. I'm going to begin working on the background. I started off with a piece of paper that I'm using as the base, and then I layered this piece of striped gutted pattern paper on top of it, and then I'm going to add some navy blue paper to the background as well. And I don't want a lot of navy blue showing, I just want a very thin border. So I only cut it a tiny bit smaller than the white paper that I'm going to use in the background. And I got that out too, just in case I need it anywhere else on the background or from another layout. And then I attach that down. And then I decided that before putting the white paper down, I wanted to add one more layer of color. So I'm using this other piece of pattern paper that's from the Boardwalk collection. I gutted that out, and I'm adding that as one more layer in the background. And since I decided to add in the yellow paper, the white paper now has to be cut again. This white paper is mixed media paper. It's a 120-pound smooth white cardstock, and it's already covered with some white Liquitex gesso. I like to have a little stash of papers that I've already coated with gesso in my craft room, and that way when I'm feeling creative, I don't have to take the time to do that. I can just get started right away. So because I didn't just coat it with gesso, I forgot which side, or I picked the wrong side to put the mixed media on. I had to flip it over because this is the gesso side, not the other one. And I'm using some Dylusions spray. This is a shimmer spray called Polished Jade. And because a lot of this is going to be covered up by the rays of the sun, I'm not worried like I usually am about making the background too dark. The Dylusion sprays are very, very intense colors. They're very concentrated, and I really love them. And I feel like this is the perfect opportunity to use them because, as you can see there, only a little hint of the color will be showing through the rays of the sun. And in addition to the Dylusion spray, I also use a Tattered Angels Glimmer Mist, and the color of that is Midnight Fantasy. It's a dark blue color. I've applied the sprays all over the background, I dried it, and now I'm going back in with a second layer of color. I want to include some splatters on the background, so I start first with the Midnight Fantasy color, and then I add some of the Polished Jade color, and I'm putting the splatters everywhere. I want to make sure that I get them along the outer edge. And I just had a little bit of an accident, but it was easy to clean it up because there's the white gesso in the background. And you can see that I'm drying and I'm squishing the color down at the same time. Sometimes when I dry the color will pool where in the areas where there's a little bit too much paint, and then I'll either squish it down or I will use some paper towel and I'll sop up the remaining color. I also love to add some splatters of water to the background and then use a paper towel to lift up some of the color. I just love the textured effect that gives to the background. And to add a little bit more texture to the background, I'm going to be adding some modeling paste, and I'm putting it through this Tim Holtz stencil. I love this stencil because it adds a little bit of texture paste to the background, and it's appropriate for so many layouts. This is one of my most used stencils. I add the white acrylic paint to the modeling paste because the modeling paste that I use is not a bright white, and I wanted it to be a bright white. Modeling pastes come in all different shades, so if you like bright white, maybe be on the lookout for a modeling paste that is more on the white side, or this is a really easy fix if you have modeling paste that's not as white as you want it to be. It's very rare that I make a mixed media background without adding some white splatters. So I added some white splatters to the background, and I made sure that it was very dry before doing this because there's been times when I've flipped over my mixed media background, it wasn't dry, and I have smudged things. So I was 100% sure that it was thoroughly dry, and I put a lot of ATG adhesive on the back to hold it down to the background. And now I'm ready to start layering other elements on top. The first thing that I add is this piece of blue pattern paper. I add that to the bottom half of the layout. And now I'm going to cut out my photo. I wanted to cut the photo a little bit smaller than the circle that was already there, the yellow circle that I used to make, I guess, the base of the sun. But I realized that it was the same size, so I am going to go back and I'm going to cut a little smaller. I put some adhesive on the back because since I've already cut it, I didn't want it to slide around as I was trying to cut it smaller. So that held it in place, and now I have cut it a little bit smaller. So now that yellow circle serves as a mat to the photo. Now I'm adding the title to the layout. I'm calling it By the Shore, and I'm using some white foam thickers. I found these stickers very easy to line up. I just used my T-square, and it was very easy for once to get the stickers just in the right place. I didn't have to rearrange them as many times as I normally do. And I like the way the white shows up against the dark blue color. I wanted to add some elements to the bottom of the layout. I started with 2 strips of paper. One is the yellow paper that I used in the background, and then I used a piece of orange paper, and I used a border punch, and I cut a scalloped strip, and I'm layering the yellow paper over the scalloped strip and cutting it to size. And the punch that I used for that border strip was made by Fiskars. I attach those 2 layered strips toward the bottom of the layout, and then I use my pencil and I trace around the photo, and I'm going to use the line that I'm drawing now a little bit later. In the sticker sheet from the collection, there's this great sticker. It's a whole line of tickets, and they're in all the colors of the collection. So I picked up my dauber and I just used whatever orange ink was already on the dauber, and then I layered that sticker on top of the 2 pieces of pattern paper. I wanted to include some clouds on the sun, but the clouds that I had kind of a yellowish tinge to them. These are some chipboard, I believe Studio Calico brand clouds, and so I wanted them to be more of a pure white, so I painted them with some white acrylic paint. I wanted to add some more stickers to the bottom, so I made 2 clusters of stickers. I used a whole bunch of different brands of stickers that I had in my stash, and I tried to pick out stickers that were blues and oranges and went with the color scheme that I already had. There's a sticker that says summertime, and it has a whole rainbow of colors on it, and that was my way of fulfilling the Scraptember prompt of rainbow. Now I'm going to do some stitching around the sun, and so I'm using this tool and I'm poking some holes into the paper, and I'm spacing them 1/2 centimeter apart. I just find that to be a convenient size that I think is a good length for stitches. In addition to punching holes to make some stitches on the rays, I also punch some holes on the circle, and I follow that pencil line that I drew earlier, and I make the holes approximately 1/2 centimeter apart on that part of the sun as well. I finished punching all the holes, and then I spent a bit of time doing some stitching. Stitching does take a little bit of time, but I really feel that it's worth it. I love the impact. I used some white embroidery thread, and this is the result. But before I finally get the sun attached down to the background, I want to pop it up on some foam. So I start by cutting a circle, and then I'm going to cut strips and put them behind each of the rays of the sun. And that'll just give the sun a little bit of dimension and make it a little bit more prominent on the page. And now that the sun is finally completed, I'm going to use some ATG adhesive and attach it down to the background. And I forgot to mention that this photo is a photo that was taken in Cape Cod several years ago, and it's making me really miss the beach because I haven't been there in quite a while, especially the Cape Cod beaches. Hopefully we'll go back next year. I attached the photo down to the sun, and now I'm bringing back those clouds that I had painted earlier, and I'm spreading them around the layout, and I'm just continuing to move them around until I like the arrangement, and then I'm going to use some ATG adhesive and attach them down. And that completes my day 16 layout. Here are some close-ups. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I wanted to say thank you so much for all of your likes and your comments as well. There are a whole bunch of other 30 Days of Sketches videos, and you can find links to the channels of the scrapbookers who made them in the description box. I hope everybody has a great day. I'll see you tomorrow for day 17. Bye-bye.